Hallelujah. Okay. All right. Because that's the point, right? That even though Mike is in a completely different industry than most of the rest of us, we can still learn from what he's looking at and what he's going through. Okay. All right. Oliver, do you still want to be next?
Sure, I have no problem unless there's someone else who's maybe, like I say, a little less technical that wants to jump on.
That's Oliver's code for we must focus. All right, go ahead
Well, just
and
some of these words are very specific to my work
okay.
that aren't necessarily shared. Okay, let's see if it'll let me share the screen. Have we started?
Yep.
Okay, so here we go. A company called Chemtray looking for a lab quality manager.
Okay. All right. All right. And I love it when they put compensation and some other information right up at the top of the screen because that helps me like work through it. And then for Oliver, are you already in Wyoming?
Yes, yeah, I happen to be in Rock Springs, which is a couple hours away from Riverton.
Okay. All right. And then you report to a quality manager. Okay. So we're talking mid-level management and compensation structure is already relatively close to what Mike's bottom was on that last resume or job description. All right, let's walk through this. So salary ranges are determined by role level and location. That's normal. Range displayed, blah, blah, blah. Now, what would highlight to me right there, Oliver, is that's a really, and I mean really narrow range, right?
Okay.
And so one of my first questions for the HR person would be, is this a typo? Or do you always post tight ranges? And you can do that research on your own as you look at other careers that Chemtrade is listing. And are they all within that tight range? That could be a little bit of it could be a warning sign, but it could also be a sign that there's good equity and real transparency from a compensation standpoint in the company, right? So again, it's that push and pull. It could be a good thing. It could not be a good thing.
Yeah, my limited experience looking for these jobs is that the range is really right in exactly what I'd expect to see for this job.
Okay. Right. And then for your growth, that would trigger a question of tell me about the growth opportunities and promotion and advance, right? But we would structure that question differently. Promise. We'll get to that. Okay. So
Because I'm
chemtrade,
really interested in how to structure that question.
okay. We'll spend a lot of time on that, especially in the negotiations section and a little bit in the interview section, right? Because that's a critical question that a lot of us are going to have to navigate. Okay. Chemtrade is committed to delivering innovative solutions, blah, blah, blah. Or as Google would say, wah, wah, wah. At Chemtrade, we believe in creating an environment where everyone feels valued, respected, and empowered to contribute to their unique perspectives and talents. Okay, by putting people at the center of our operations, we build strong connections, nurture innovation, and create a fulfilling work experience for all. So that kind of language, Oliver, infers to me that they expect culture to compensate for compensation.
Mm,
So, and again, that's not a bad thing because this goes back to the knowing yourself. At the end of my one of my last corporate jobs, I would have traded a culture that was truly like this for the compensation I was receiving. Okay.
so my limited experience with these kinds of companies, sorry, I keep saying limited. I'm getting to the point where I may not need to say that all the time. Is that the HR person writing this has never been to the site that I would be working at.
Mhm. Right.
And even on the site that I would be working at, I will be in a laboratory which has a culture quite different than the industrial aspects of the site, and even the direct management of the industrial parts of the site. So in the past, I've kind of just skimmed through this as well until I actually talk to someone who has some part of experience in the part where I'll be working. It's just kind of all wow, wow, wow.
Right. So John, you have a comment.
Oliver, I've done a quality audit at this site.
Okay.
If you want to know about them, you can reach out and we can talk.
I would love to.
All right.
Insider information. This is why we job team people, right? Okay, so John has like the solution for you. So, but a question that you could ask as you go through your HR interviews and as you look at different interviews along the way, should you choose to proceed, right?
Right.
Would be, I noticed how strongly your value statements are worded on your job description. So I'm assuming that that is tightly held at the corporate level. Tell me how that cascades to the individual sites where I would be working. And then give me an example. You see the difference? Not just tell me about or what are, but give me an example of how this culture cascades to the individual labs that I will be monitoring.
Writing notes. Thank you.
Okay. And what you're looking for is if they panic when you ask that question. And you guys all know what that body language looks like, right? If they panic or they're really uncomfortable, that's a warning sign. You're looking for their knowledge of what happens downline. So once
Mm-hmm.
we get into the subsites or the individual sites, is it really what corporate thinks it is or thinks it should be? Because then what you're navigating is someone who's going to tell you to off at the site level when you're held to a certain standard at the corporate level, right?
Yeah, and I've experienced that.
Yeah. And you probably don't want to experience it again.
I like to avoid it if possible.
All right. So it may not be a strong boundary, but it's a boundary, right? Okay. Relocation assistance provided. Do they really want you to move to this location or can you commute in, right? And if they really want you to move to that location, are you okay with that kind of a move? Okay. And relocation assistance will be provided. That's really important to pay attention to because we experienced it ourselves when my husband moved from the eastern side of Washington to the western side of Washington. And they're like, oh, well, we can give you $500 because you're only moving 4 hours, right? So you would want to explore that as you get to the compensation discussions or even ahead of time if that's a big deal for you. All right, let's move down into it. Sulfuric acid production facility. So you'd probably be working really closely with the site safety managers, right? Will be part of a team that meets the needs for producing highly specialized materials, supporting a rapidly growing semiconductor manufacturing industry that will be highly dynamic over the next decade. As you read that, do you have questions?
I think as I read that, I tend to make assumptions about the little bit that I know, kind of how these organizations work. And with those assumptions, I tend to just move on in my mind. Um, so as I look at it more closely, though, the highly specialized materials, I mean, sulfuric acid is sulfuric acid. What exactly are they specializing? And is there dealing with semiconductor manufacturing industry and expecting, that to be dynamic? Are there specific goals that they're trying to meet as far as any changes at their site, and how would that affect the requirements of analysis in the laboratory?
Right. Good identification. Other things that might come into play in that innocuous little sentence there is, like you said, the quotas, but the timelines on deliverables, and how frequently may the team be pressured to hit a quota that is not attainable. Or since they mention highly dynamic and highly specialized materials, how frequently are they needing to change out their full process? And what does that look like? Are they fully empowered to do that? Is it a difficult change order process when those highly dynamic changes float through? And how supported is the team to make that conversion? How pressured are they to get ahead of that curve?
And just from my past experience, one question that I really appreciate this conversation. One question that comes to me at that is, with me being a mid-level manager, how involved am I going to be on setting those timelines, and how much control am I going to have over getting the tasks done, the on hands tasks that the analysts will do? How much control am I going to have in setting the priorities for those tasks and getting them done in order to meet the timelines?
Right. So are you going to be consulted as those timelines are handed down, right? So that as the person with the experience with the site, you can say, physically, it's going to take us 72 hours to make that change. We can't be pushing product out the door 48 hours after the change comes through, right?
Correct.
Excellent call out. Okay, the lab quality manager will oversee laboratory personnel and activities, provide technical guidance and operational support to develop, maintain, and improve laboratories and associated processes for the plant, okay, with a focus on ultra-pure sulfuric acid. I'm going to have to read that one 3 times. um, So technical guidance, operational support. So you're going to be consulting, but you also need to maintain and improve the laboratories and the processes. And the position will represent a leadership role in laboratory management and product quality. Nowhere in here are they talking. So that would be a question for me for the company, is what is that intersective role that safety and quality play, and how collaborative are they in establishing the success of the team, right? Because you're going to be having your quality audits, and then you're also going to be having your safety audits. So how does that intersect? And if you get a really blank look, especially with this type of product that they're working with, that would be a little scary for me. Okay. And then it also says this role is dynamic and requires flexibility in meeting ever-changing job demands on a strategic and hands-on level while fulfilling day-to-day responsibilities. Mike, I'm going to pick on you for a minute. What does that sentence mean in real life? This role is dynamic and requires flexibility in meeting ever-changing job demands on a strategic and hands-on level while fulfilling day-to-day responsibilities. Keep in mind, this is a manager role, mid-level manager, not top-level manager.
It means that the people you report to will be fuzzy on strategy, chaotic in execution, and may have difficulty setting priorities. Sorry, that's the pessimistic view.
I think
That
that's
or
The
actually
optimistic view is that they're growing so freaky fast that they just can't handle stuff and they really, really desperately need you.
the more likely explanation here is that they have a very demanding customer base that's constantly changing their requirements.
Especially
Wink, wink.
I see.
So the lab manager will be delivering on multiple priorities in support of the quality and operations teams, and so this is a call out here, Oliver, and business functions. Okay. So you don't just have one boss in how you're managing the team that actually does the work. You have the boss of the role that you're actually hired to do. Then you have the operations team and you have the business functions. So you're trying to navigate and answer to 4 different levels. And as we go through this, guys, please don't think I'm trying to dissuade Oliver from applying for this job. What the intent of this discussion and exercise is to say, don't go into this blind, question and scrub. If this is something that you're interested in, question and scrub so that you're prepared when you get on the phone with the HR team or with when you do your interviews, so that you can ask the questions that are causing you a little bit of a pause, or that your gut says, oh, warning, warning, Will Robinson, right? Where you want to step back just a little bit and say, I want to know what this means. And I'm going to ask some tough questions to see if they can answer it in a way that satisfies me. Because yes, you're interviewing for a job, but yes, you are also interviewing the company, the manager, and the team to see if they're the right fit for you. Because if they're not the right fit for you, you're going to be miserable. You're not going to keep the job long and you're going to be frustrated. And the people at home who have to put up with you are going to be frustrated too. Okay. All right. Sorry, that was an aside. All right. So the lab manager will support efforts to maintain compliance with responsible care, ISO, blah, 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 quality, ISO, and other corporate sponsored initiatives. That corporate sponsored initiatives, Oliver, I would question.
Yeah, that's the first thing that came to my mind is what are those initiatives? Where do they come from? And how do I what level of support am I required to give to them?
Right. Yes, because that's like all other duties as assigned, right? So, all right, let's get into the qualifications. And you've read through this before. Let's pick 3 and then move on to the next section. What three were you like, I run into this all the time, or I don't know what that means?
Oh, let's see real quick. Let's jump all the way down here. Demonstrated experiments in change management and leading change. Customer focus, including the ability to clearly communicate both oral and written.
All right, so the first question I would have is, who's my customer? Do you have direct interaction with, as John indicated, a potential client? If so, like, I don't think you should at your level. So your customer is supposedly going to be your internal customers. And by internal customer, do they mean the lab that you're quality auditing and managing? Do they mean management? Who is your customer?
Right. Whether it's actually the production facility itself with their boardrooms.
Right. And then demonstrated experience in change management and leading change. That tells me that this role, for whatever reason, is going to be charged with fixing something big, potentially on a regular basis, right? So the first question I would have is, do you have change management experience, either having been led through change or as a change manager yourself? And if not, again, it goes back to what Mike and John and Dax have talked about, right? Taking those words and throwing it into an AI generation and have it pop up, and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, I know what that means, right? And yes, I've done that, but not necessarily in those terms, right? So the question would be, when they talk about change management, my first question is, tell me what methodology and process you follow when launching change in your organization. And is it different at the corporate level, the leadership level, and at the site level? Because if they don't have an established methodology or process, then that means you're going to be making it up as you go and epically failing or feeling like you epically fail, right? Because your approach is not going to be consistent with what the teams have experienced before, or it's going to be difficult, and how you're measured on success of doing this is going to be very difficult if you don't have a template or a process to follow.
Yeah, I
What,
like that question. How am I measured on whether or not a change was successfully implemented?
right? And definitely what methodologies or processes do you already have in place to facilitate change? Because
Okay.
I think we're all senior-ish enough that we've seen change done badly. And we've also seen change done quasi okay-ish. We may be lucky enough to have someone here who's seen change done really well. Um, let's pick another one.
Um, Excellent analytical and problem solving skills, group facilitation, conflict resolution, and the ability to handle multiple projects simultaneously while working in a fast paced environment.
All right. Liz, tell us what that means to you,
Seems like a lot of catchphrases stuffed into one sentence.
right?
Just like you said earlier, they survive in chaos.
Mhm. Yep. And you're not just managing the lab, you're going to be expected to look at the data, analyze where problems are coming from, which is your job as a lab, right? You're
Yeah.
looking at that data and you're saying, whoa, time out, something's not right. But then you also are going to be doing group facilitation and conflict resolution. And my question would be,
What's
out.
this group? And are these personnel, HR type conflicts, or
Mhm.
yeah,
And are you going to have to be doing it up and down the chain, right? Are you going to have to be doing it down to the people working the line to say, whoa, time out, this isn't good, we've got to back off, and simultaneously managing that conflict up to say, hey guys, we're not going to meet our quota because we have a critical process failure right here, right? And my question would be, tell me how that works at the site level and then also at the corporate level. And again, do you have existing templates and processes in place with which your teams are familiar? Because if you're expected to put this all together from scratch, and maybe this is what John is alluding to when he's like, hey, call me offline. Um,
Mhm.
this particular group may be extremely problematic, right? Okay. And you're handling multiple projects. Most of us are used to handling multiple projects. I think the question is, do those projects all come due at the same time? And is my success measured off of those projects, right? Because the compensation structure mentions bonus, right? So, and then travel for training and project support, 5 to 10%. That sounds about normal. Ish. If you really are in a highly dynamic environment that changes frequently, that could mean that the chemicals and the processes that they use could change rapidly, in which case you're probably going to need a little bit more training and introduction to some of the hot things that are going on in the semiconductor business in order to be effective. Or does your manager do that and then cascade to those of you who are lab managers at the site level? Okay. All right. Any others? Does anyone else see anything in there where they're like, that seems kind of interesting? Do we want to look at that because you've seen it in some of your job descriptions? John?
Just my recommendation to Oliver here would be, and research what goes on in semiconductor manufacturing and how they manage their supply base, because it is a little different than the rest of manufacturing. So that, given that they've highlighted that specifically, right, that's where you want to probe. Change management and the quality expectations and all that are very different there than you would normally find in other places.
Yeah, that's a real good comment. I appreciate that, John. Yeah, most of my experience has not been directly supporting semiconductor, but heavy industry.
Yeah, and I've been going through my page of notes on that site, and if you want to call me, I can share some of the insights I had
Yeah, do I
on
have
those specific questions and
your LinkedIn?
everything. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'll put that in the chat to you.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
All right, let's scroll down and take a look at medical requirements, right? All employees are required to complete and pass their annual medical assessments, including but not limited to PFT and your ability to wear a respirator. So your goatee may need to go away.
Yeah, I've done that in the past.
Okay. Physical demands, work environment. The physical demands described here are representative of those that must be met. Okay, so like nothing really calling out there. What do they mean by close vision? Or is that close vision? And what does that mean? That would
Specific.
be, go ahead.
So yeah, sorry, I had actually just was looking at where that is. So I suspect that this is code for I may have to open up instruments and figure out the internals of them in an emergency situation where they can't get a contracted technician in.
Okay. Hopefully not that you're putting your face right up to the acid, right?
No, this would be an instrument. This would be a
Okay.
ICP-MS or a UV vis.
Okay. And you're also going to be required to potentially crouch or crawl, which, production environments, yes, you need to do that. Okay. All right, let's look at responsibilities down here. Let's see. Hey, Jason, would you pick one that you want to take a look at? And Annalee, would you pick another? And then Oliver, you pick another one that you want to pick apart here.
Antoinette,
Yeah.
I am running to see if I can get Wi-Fi from my building since
Okay.
my however that happens, I don't know. My system went down, so I'm on a hotspot, but I'll be right back.
Okay. All right. So Oliver, since you've been through this before, let's start with yours, and then Jason will have you, and then Annalee will have yours. Okay. So just pick from the list.
Yeah, responsible and expenses pertaining to all laboratory equipment, supplies, maintenance, and repair. CapEx submission for laboratory-related proposals, as well as documentation relating to all budgetary and expense-related items.
Tell me what you feel about that.
So, I've definitely been in places where a lab manager has to manage the budget for the laboratory, but my questions would be, who sets that budget? How involved am I in what the capital expenditure decisions are? And let's see. What role do I have with regards to the relationship I'll have with upper management? Meaning, I assume a quality manager would probably be the person that I'm directly reporting to, and how involved am I in those conversations about what this budget is and should be?
Right. Those are all excellent questions. I would add another one. Is my hitting budget part of my bonus compensation structure? Right? Because you may have a budget that says you have 200,000, and then you may have something go down that costs 400,000. So you're going to miss by 200,000, right? You don't control, per se, the efficiency of the working machinery. So is that budget hit going to impact your compensation? Okay. And all great questions, right? Exactly how detailed, like, am I on my own? Is there a checklist every year? Like, if you were in IT, everyone in this division gets a new laptop, everyone in that division gets a new laptop the next year. Right? All right, Jason, what one do you pick?
Well, it looks like to me it's more than one category, but the next one down, drive
Okay.
the accurate and timely installation of equipment. Um,
That's a big line, huh?
yeah, it is.
Okay. So as the lab quality manager, you're also driving the accurate and timely installation of new laboratory equipment in relevant labs and support installation of new equipment in operations that have a direct impact on laboratory analysis, sampling ports, meters, particulate counters. All of that's kind of normal, right? Sometimes that crosses into the safety zone. Sometimes quality manages that, right? So again, that would be that interesting conversation to have on where those two roles and responsibilities intersect. And then evaluate new technology, improved capabilities for the industries we serve, customer needs and expectations, and continual monitoring and measurement devices and methodologies. This includes new and existing equipment designs and construction. So Oliver, to me, this almost sounds like you have two masters, right? You have the quality role, and then you also have an operations role where you may be working with facility personnel. And what training are you going to receive to help facilitate those installations and evaluations? And then also where it says in here, evaluate new technology and improved capabilities. To me, that screams trade shows or, to John's point, being involved in standards boards or being involved in organizations that deal with this technology at this time so that you're kind of getting ahead of what could be coming down the pike, right? Because if you're not able to get ahead of it, then having to evaluate new technology and improved capabilities when someone at the top of the chain says, hey, I saw this really cool tool and I know it's going to solve all of our problems. If you have no experience with that tool, you're not going to be able to ask the critical questions about, okay, how does this installation happen at the actual unit level? Right. So that's a conversation of, you could say, I love the idea of being more involved in the installation of laboratory equipment and being able to recommend those new technologies and improved capabilities. Tell me what the CapEx budget cycle is, and if you feel we get ahead of those new improvement needs in a timely manner. Or are we always playing catch up? And is that what you're looking to solve? Right. So again, remember, as you're reading through this, you're looking for things that hit your buttons, potential warning signs, and you're also looking at what problem are they trying to solve? Because it sounds like, as Joan alluded to, they could have a really demanding client, or they could be scrambling to figure out how they're going to adapt their end product in a rapidly changing environment that includes both technology and supply chain, right? And are they able to get ahead of that? And what is that working relationship? Oliver, you brought that up already, right? What is that working relationship in the different groups and areas? Anyone else see anything in there that they would want to question?
What do they mean not limited to ISO? Sorry, that's two lines below the highlight.
So support and quality. Okay, support and quality, support of quality and responsible care, including not limited to ISO
and-
internal and
And
customer.
that one jumps because they've capitalized it, right? They got the
Well-
capitalization there, which means it might be internal company language. And you
It's
got
International Standards Organization. There's
well, ISO is in, I know what that is, but responsible care isn't usually,
But if you look
Oh, where's
that
above,
coming from?
there's a couple of references to two different ISO certifications,
Mhm.
and so I'm reading that as being you're going to have to meet those ISO certifications, but you're also going to have to deal with all the internal ones above and beyond that.
That's how I read it too.
Yeah.
But I would ask specifically, they've got
What
responsible
are
care
those?
capitalized. I would ask them, what is responsible care? Is this a company program, or unless this is a lab thing that's well known throughout the industry?
No, it's very specific. It's something I haven't run across before.
Okay.
And then also it says internal and customer. So remember we were questioning in the above that we had read about customer, and was that internal customers? Because as a quality manager, you shouldn't be reporting to a customer, but maybe the customer does have demands.
Mhm.
Customer has to-
So that's a really good call out as to, ooh, what does that really mean? And how many masters am I serving? Right? And then
What?
effectively interact with plant personnel and cross-functional resources to understand and interpret manufacturing and laboratory data to drive continuous improvement.
Mhm.
That doesn't really jump out as a questionable. That seems more like normal part of lab manager job. But Oliver, what's your experience? Does that cause you any pause?
So, in my experience, the big question is when they're talking about these cross-functional resources, how involved am I in those conversations, and who is making the decision as to how those resources are allocated?
Okay. So conversely, how involved are those cross-functional resources in your business, right? And in the day-to-day running of your job, right? Okay,
Yeah.
right. Annalee, did you have one that jumped out to you?
I was looking at the very bottom one. Oh, sorry, the bottom one of the screen.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot in here, huh?
Yeah, there is a lot. The second part of that, where it says ensure consistency of methodology, equipment, process, work instructions, forms, inventory, and all related laboratory items across plants where possible and appropriate. And so a question that comes to my mind is there already existing, and this has come up previously, is there already existing documentation and standards and processes that need to be applied and followed, or is that something you're going to have to take initiative on?
And Annalee, I love how you call that one out because it says ensure consistency, and then it uses a plural across plants. Well, Oliver, I thought you were going to be at one plant, right? So does that mean you have peers at other plants, or does that mean that you're expected to drive results at a plant where if your travel's only 5 to 10%, you pop into once or twice a year, right? What does that really mean?
Right, or is it the possibility that the facility itself is servicing more than one plant on site?
Right. In which case, that's a whole different ball of wax, right?
Yeah, that means there's a lot more going on in everything that we've talked about so far. If it's happening in, 3 different factories that I'm servicing on site.
Let's see. Let's pick one more and then scroll to the end. Again, it brings up change management and action items. So again, that tells me that you've got that kind of continuous chain where you've got to be managing up and down. And then utilizing data tools they bring up again. that provide laboratory support for quality engineers. So that one tells me that you'd want to do some investigating and questioning on what is the structure of the company, right? So you're a quality lab manager and you report to the quality manager. Do the quality engineers report to the quality manager? Are they your peers? Do they expect you to drive their action items and to take the notes at the meetings? And so what is that dynamic, right? So you're providing laboratory support for the quality engineers. How do you work together to drive results? And again, this list is pretty exhaustive. If you were to even think about it in terms of one high production, high dynamic, let's use their word, dynamic plant, this is a lot to also do. And then this last bullet, right? Support failure mode and effect analysis, events and related actions, as well as other continual improvement projects. So roadmaps, green belt projects, so that's Six Sigma, right? And mapping and other duties assigned by the ultra pure quality manager. Like, what's your role going to really be, Oliver, right? And so when you get into this exhaustive list of things, and again, it's different for every role, right? So if I'm working with a project manager and they have this exhaustive list, some of the tools that we talk about going into an interview with is to ask the question, if you were to look at every role that is listed in the job description or that you have high expectations for this person to solve the problems that you've outlined, right? What's the desired outcome of the success of this role? Pick the top 3 drivers. And so, Oliver, this is a potential question, right? And you may want to expand it to the top 5 drivers, but what are the top 3 drivers? And how does that impact the success of the role? Because what you're looking for there are, do they have hot buttons where there have been epic failures or frustrations in the past? Or are there really a few core successful measures that kind of just drive all the others? Because in your first 3 months on the job, as you're drinking from the fire hose, you're not going to be able to do everything. Right?
Yeah,
But
that's
where
yeah,
do you
pretty
want?
obvious, especially with something this long.
Yeah. So where should you be focusing? And then the other significant question I would ask in an interview, especially with something highly technical like the roles that you're looking at, is what is your onboarding and mentoring process for a person in this role? Because if they're like, whoa, he's a quality manager, good job, we think he meets our criteria, he's a good guy, he gels with the team, go. You're going to probably fail, right? Because it sounds like they have a lot of, as Anna Lee pointed out it, as she called out, that there are some highly technical things and boxes and paperwork that need to be done in order to get this job done, right? Okay. And then what it offers you: embracing diversity, maximizing results, cultivating a work environment that embraces values. Again, to that question we talked about at the very beginning, does this cascade all the way down and truly enforced? Give me examples about how the values trickle from the corporate level all the way down to the plant and the facility level. They celebrate multiple approaches and viewpoints. What does that mean? Give me an example, right? Employee resource groups. Oh, okay. So based on my experience, ERGs lead to
Yeah.
frustration, right? Because You say, hey, employees, you're the best ones able to identify what needs to happen, and go forth and do. We'll support you. Oh, wait. Yeah, that's a really good idea, but that costs a lot of money. So we'll take that under advisement, right? So you would say, give me examples of ERGs that are highly successful and what change have they driven? And how is that celebrated in your culture? Because there's a lot of good words in there. There's also a lot of buzzwords. And the reality of translating it, especially in a production environment, is hard to do. All right, let's scroll down a little bit further. Diversity. So again, they're focusing a lot on culture versus compensation. All right, guys, we've done a lot of scrubbing on just 2 resumes here, and I know we've had people who had to jump. What questions do you have? Was this valuable? Have you taken away anything that will help you in your search?
I think I'd just note, and Antoinette, number one, this has been very insightful, very good. Going through and questioning each line of the job description. One thing I've kind of picked up as we've gone through this, though, is I can't form assumptions about
Right.
each job thing. What I need to do is form questions,
Yes.
right? Because if I form assumptions, I may get myself down a path where I either prepare incorrectly for an interview, or I dismiss a job that I shouldn't, or whatever, right? But if I come in with questions, I think I'm better prepared to go in and really evaluate the position.
Yes.
Thank you.
Spot on. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of along lines with that, I think one of the major takeaways I have from this is I read through this job description, and I'm running into things like change management. I'm running into things that I've encountered in other locations in my job, and I'm just kind of breezing past it. I'm just kind of in my brain. It's like, oh, so they've got something there. If I happened to take this job, I'd kind of learn about it. And I really think I was doing myself a disservice just having these assumptions that, oh, these are corporate buzzwords. Yeah, they've got these things in there, and I'll learn about them later. Where if I take the time to actually read through it and look at what those expectations are, and what they could really mean, and start questioning that, it gives me a lot of information that I wish I'd have had at my last job.
Right. Yeah. And it's that questioning, right? Be curious. You don't have to say, well, I have a lot of questions. You can say, I'm really curious about some of the things that I read in the job description, and let's explore those together, right? Just to make sure that we're the right fit. And please use the we're the right fit for each other. Don't say I am the right fit for you, because that's not what this is about. Right? Okay. All right. Any other questions? And since we'll be doing this again, is there anything you don't want that happened today that you don't want to have happen in a future discussion?
Yeah, my internet going down in the middle of you doing all this and re-recording it and it being a great recording. Other than that, um, yeah, let's hear from everybody else.
Was the time used well, or did we spend too much time on too little?
I liked the deep dive.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we'll deep dive some more. We'll plan that out. Okay. Anything else? Jason, your cat only made 1 appearance. I have
He
issues with that.
did, but yeah,
Tell him he's
yeah.
welcome.
I actually was, because of reading through all of these job descriptions that I read through, and all the boilerplate that's typically at the beginning and the end. I have so much cynicism about that, and because part of me just assumes that that's just being posted in there because HR requires you to say that. But you talk about the espoused culture that's being shown there and the real culture that you then find out about after you're there 6 months.
Yeah. Yep, and we'll spend more time on that too, in future conversations about really how to structure those questions and to not be afraid of asking those questions, right? And to set the expectation right at the beginning of, I know you have a lot of questions for me as we go through this interview. I also have quite a few questions for you to make sure that we are the right fit for each other and that we balance each other to get to the results that you need and also to be a job that I really enjoy. How are we going to make sure that both of our question sets get answered, right? There's nothing wrong with setting that expectation at the beginning. And if they are not willing to set that expectation at the beginning, please have the courage to say, this is not what I need, right? Because if they don't want someone who comes knowing themselves and knowing exactly what they bring to a job, then they can find that person elsewhere. Steve.
I think one thing that in the past that you did was from the very beginning when Job Team was in person, you brought together some insight of asking questions around what we're concerned about. And so I think we delved on that, but I think that's maybe where we're going to go in the future a little bit about asking some questions to uncover even more things of maybe this looks like something I've experienced before, and I don't want to, I think you said a minute ago, or John said emotionally, just assume that that means that. So I should ask question, what does that really look like? Or what does that mean? Or, I think I'm excited that, for those who are in this journey for the long haul, which many of them have been,
Yeah.
so I guess the question is, and I realize a lot of people have to drop off and have interviews. I know that always trumps everything, but I guess the question would be, do you want to share where we're going?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, I think our plan is to do that next session or the session after. I think we'll probably move it to this session because we've alluded to it a couple of times in this conversation already. And I'll send out to include in the invite just some worksheets. And they're a little kitschy, right? Because I'm not going to update them and they were built 2 years ago. But they're opening discussions with yourself about what we talked a lot about with Mike, right? What are your boundaries? What are your accelerators? What do you have to have in that job in order to make it worth it for you to wake up every morning and get out the door? Or at least put on a shirt that you can show up on a Zoom, right? So, and we'll spend time there and then we'll design questions around them. I don't know if you remember, Steve, but in that first group, we had someone who had to have chaos in her work environment. If things weren't rapidly changing all the freaking time, a very dynamic organization, right? Then she wasn't happy and she couldn't handle it because it wasn't the energy level that she needed. And so one of the questions that we helped her come up with was, tell me about the frequency of change in your organization and how often you feel that your teams are operating at their max capacity. And how do they handle that? And how do you as a manager handle that? Right? So it gives you an opportunity to say, what's most important to me? And I'm going to ask that question with specific examples of how do you handle that? Tell me an example of what does that look like? And then the question that I absolutely love is, I love how you articulated that. Would your team agree? What would they say that's different? Because then that tells you, does this manager accept difference on their team, difference of idea, difference of process, right? And how do they encourage and develop that and manage that? So that's one of my funnest conversations to have because we get to learn more about ourselves and each other, right? And we get to hear some really gnarly stories about things that work and things that don't.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Anybody have any more questions before we go?
No, it's all awesome. Thank you so much, Antoinette.
Thank you, Liz. Thanks, guys, for sticking in there for the long haul. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Yay. Look forward to it.
Okay. I will see
Thank you.
everybody next week. This is so I just since I still have a few of you here. By the way, Annalie, welcome. And again, sorry, I'm in and off of the screen for a few minutes. So because of what Antoinette said, I'm going to give you guys, since you're the remaining people here, I'm going to just give you some insight. What Antoinette, as I asked her, I said, "Hey, are you ready?" And she had alluded, and she's calling me. Hold on a sec here. Just a sec here. Oh,